there's going to be a lot of different things where people want to just see every content creator immediately get out of the gates and be like, so are you taking a stand now? Are you going to call this person out? And then is this person not going to be called? If you don't call out this specific person, then I can't associate with you unless this person is called out simultaneously and all this kind of stuff. But content creator to content creator, in good faith, I don't think it's an outrageous thing if someone is coming to you being like, hey, by the way, I think it's just kind of, you know, you doing something to be edgy is kind of having a net negative effect because of X. You can choose to take my advice, listen, or you can choose to ignore me, one of the two. But I don't think that someone doing that is being a woke scold, just by definition. Broadly speaking, in terms of online, it seems overwhelmingly both the community with communities that experience disabilities or neurodivergent communities have both said and asked for people to stop using that word as a form of an insult, as a pejorative. Stop using that word in that way, and to stop reaffirming or normalizing the use of that word. I don't think that's a huge ask, to be completely frank. I don't know why we keep going in circles about this topic. It seems to come up quite a bit on a kind of cyclical pattern where one or two content creators will start using it again, or just defend their use of the R-SLUR, and then that has this whole cycle of people saying, hey, you shouldn't do that, and then this whole, well, people who are saying you shouldn't do that are woke scolds, or the purpose of this was for reclamation, or the other purpose of this was for something else. Now, if you didn't know, and this is, I guess, going to be a personal story on my behalf, if you didn't know, one of the bigger and most frequent insults I usually get called if you start going to the very far right side of the internet is usually the F-slur, the R-slur, and then lately, ever since letting people know that I have a indigenous mother, making fetal alcohol syndrome jokes towards me. This is something that is just part of being a public figure. The larger your audience grows, the more people on the other side of the political aisles are going to see you as like an opponent or something like that to destroy or defeat, and they're going to try to do it through whatever method is their preferred way, you know, that kind of stuff. When it comes to reclamation, though, the reason reclamation has a lot of power is that if someone had called me the F-slur, which I got called all the time in high school, by the way, when I was in high school, the worst thing you could possibly be as a man or as a young boy was gay. That it was like the worst thing you could possibly be. And everything that you did that was even slightly outside of the norm or embarrassing would be by definition that you were now gay, that you're now an F-slur, because like, look at you, what you did. Now, because I'm only slightly gay, I was able to hide all that and just be straight passing till much later in life and not have to think about it. And it was very easy for me. I don't have the lived experience of a young gay boy or a young bi boy who couldn't hide it, or maybe didn't even understand it, the same way that someone who was, completely 100% homosexual their whole life, what their growing up is and what the severity of that word would mean to them in that regard. But later in life, if you were to call me that word, or someone would try to use it towards me as an insult, I would say there's no power there, because I don't find that word, or I don't find being that thing insulting. I don't find being a little bit bi insulting in any way, shape, or form. So that word has no power. So I'll even refer to myself in that term, and that's what reclaiming a word like that is. A very similar thing happened to me when I was growing up, and a lot of kids in school were like super racist where I was growing up. And it's one of those things where as soon as they found out that I have an indigenous mother, that's when like the hardcore racism would start to come out. And the slur that was used in that area, which I'm not going to say because I don't even think Twitch would know what it is, to be frank, and it might be a Canadian specific slur for indigenous people, but it's a shortened version of the word for, say, chugging a drink, and it's to indicate that the person who is in fact being made fun of with that slur, they're referencing that they drink gas or they chug alcohol or things like that. That's basically what the use of that slur is trying to indicate. And obviously that immediately is one of those slurs that starts being thrown at you in Canada at that age. Hopefully things are better now. I can't speak to what the school experience is for kids, but hopefully all of this thing has become a little bit better. I'd like to think that the culture is improving, but holy hell was like general white people in that era. We're talking like over 30 years ago, but general white people in that time, kids, little kids, would go on these massive tirades. I didn't understand how they knew. It had to have come from their parents. I didn't understand how they knew so much about this, but they would tell me things like Native people are all alcoholics and drug addicts, and they get all this free money from the government, and they don't pay taxes, and like, you know, all of our parents work really hard to like make this country better, and then they are just like all these like drug addict alcoholics who like leech off of us and all this kind of stuff. And they reinforced that so strongly that I started to also think a lot of those and believe a lot of those things, and I started to be ashamed of being part Indigenous. And I'm not part Indigenous in the way Elizabeth Warren is. I've been blood quantumed. I have like a literal race card. I'm also white as fuck, by the way. This is why it's really important when I have these talks with people, and sometimes Indigenous people are really confused. Like, why do you always say that you're white? I was like, because I am, and because I spent a lot of my life hiding behind that. You wouldn't know that about me outside of a couple weird things. Like, you might notice I don't have any chest hair. I don't. I'm actually super hairless. I can't really grow facial hair well. That's basically the biggest remnants of the fact that my great-great-grandmother could speak Cree, and that my mother is Métis, and that's an aspect of it. But because of that, and because of the power of both the racism, the slurs, the hatred in that time, it made me also hate Indigenous people so much, and it was weaponized in such a way that it had that effect. So when people say that, like, you know, at the end of the day, these are just words, at the end of the day, these are not really important, to people who are in those communities, they can have a lot of power. This is all theoretical to me. I'll never know what the lived experience is like to be a black person in America. I'll never know that. I can read Du Bois. I can read Fanon. It's in that shelf right behind me. I can read Angela Davis. I love all of their writing, but I'm never, outside of the theory, gonna actually know what the lived experience is for a black person, or what hearing the N-word and being called the N-word is like for a black person. I can either clutch pearls or be genuinely disgusted, or be outraged at the idea of someone doing that to a black person and just calling them out and, being like, fuck you. But I'll never actually know what impact that has. I'll never know what impact that has in the work environment, what it's like to be a black person in an office or a job, and then being called people always think of the N-word as like, oh yeah, that's racism, but this other stuff, this is like, no, this isn't right. No, just experiencing racism all the time, just in life, like visibly. And because, again, I was able to hide those kind of things, it's one of those things where, like, I was able to go through a lot of elementary and high school, both denying parts of myself, in large part due to, that's just, the impact. Now, that's obviously the feels or the reals. Some people could be like, well, I was actually legitimately beat up all the time for being gay, Lance, and that word has no power on me. So, what do you have to say? I am not autistic, and I guess by definition I am neurodivergent, because I do have clinical ADHD, and it has been diagnosed by a doctor. I don't have a lot of the things that usually come with ADHD. ADHD and unmedicated ADHD especially usually comes with anxiety and depression in very demonstrable numbers, and I'm kind of an outlier in that regard, which is why, like, when I was first speaking to psychiatrists about this, they were really interested to talk to me more, because they're like, there is a small amount of people who, like you, Lance, have a very specific form and strong form of ADHD, but at the same time, you don't seem to be depressed or have anxiety. That's a thing. When people call me autistic on the internet as an insult, it doesn't have any effect on me, again, because I don't think inherently being autistic is bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. That's why, like, when people have used that as insults me on debates, I usually bring that up. I'll be like, that doesn't really have any power here. You understand that, right? Like, if you're trying to get under my skin with this, it's not gonna have the intended effect. So when it comes to things that directly impact communities, of which I may not be a part of, broadly speaking, it's usually really important to listen to that community. And in the case of the the community of people with disabilities, or the community of people who are neurodivergent and do not want to be called or have people use the R-SLUR as an insult, absolutely, I think it's completely fair to listen to them and to do that as a good form of behavior. The thing with reclamation, and there's obviously going to be small exceptions, but if you weren't fully aware of this, reclamation is about taking the power away from the slurs and these words, taking it back and then saying, yeah, it's not a bad thing to be this. It's not bad for me to be this way. And so your word doesn't have power. I'm going to call myself the F-slur, and I'm going to call my friends the F-slur, because we're a couple of F-slurs, and both of us, we're not ashamed of that. So that's what we're going to do. That would be different than me if I was aggressively hating on someone who also happened to be gay, just dropping the F-slurs from point, being like, oh, God damn it, you stupid F-slur, blah, 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 or something like that. Because then I'm using it in the same way that people who are trying to marginalize, the LGBTQ plus community use that word. It's empowering the word in the same way that the same people who use it to dehumanize people, or to degrade people, or to, depress them, or whatever their reason for doing it is, it reinforces that. Now, I know just by saying that, and of course, because this whole situation is surrounding right now a lot of different content creators. In this one, we've got Keffels, who seems to be repeatedly using the word. We've got, Vosh, who has obviously used the word a lot as an insult and continues to do so. Xanderhall, who has come out and said that he no longer uses that word as an insult. And then them battling with Thought Slime and all this kind of stuff. So obviously, within all the drama soup that I just mentioned, which is one hell of a giant cauldron, there's going to be a lot of different things where people want to just see every content creator immediately get out of the gates and be like, so are you taking a stand now? Are you going to call this person out? And then is this person not going to be called? If you don't call out this specific person, then I can't associate with you unless this person is called out simultaneously, and all this kind of stuff. Same thing when this is what I would expect from other content creators in regards, and this is content creator to content creator. I'm going to get to audiences and online right afterwards. But content creator to content creator, in good faith, I don't think it's an outrageous thing if someone is coming to you being like, hey, by the way, I think it's just kind of, you doing something to be edgy is kind of having a net negative effect because of X. You can choose to take my advice, listen, or you can choose to ignore me, one of the two. But I don't think that someone doing that is being a woke scold, just by definition. I hear this word used all the time. It used to be a right-wing word that now you see a lot of people, liberals and leftists, start using, being as if like the only thing is about virtue signaling. Oh, you're just getting out front and you're just trying to have the only, sanitized take so you can virtue signal and be performative and all that kind of stuff. No, I'm not here to cancel. It's not about like every single one of you. If you truly love me, or you truly love leftism, or you truly love any of the things we're talking about, you will cast aside Keffels and every other content creator forever. I can say out loud, there are times when content creators disappoint me. There are times when I think people have come after Keffels for 100% made up reasons. And that's happened to me. I know how bad that feeling is. I know how bad it is to have thousands of strangers on the internet despise you for a thing you didn't do. That Catboy Ranch conspiracy theory, or the child porn conspiracy theory, that's horrifying. That's absolutely disgusting. And the fact that so many people went with that and went with both of them, none of them have walked it back or apologized, when that is egregious levels of shit. Sincerely, that is fucked. And people who perpetuate it are not doing so in good faith. People who are criticizing her, being like, well, yeah, because you're a groomer because of this. No, this is just anti-LGBTQ plus slander of a trans woman, and trying to associate a trans woman with pedophilia, which is what most people on the right do to the LGBTQ plus community in general. That's different than when people have approached me in the past and told me things like, hey, by the way, Lance, you shouldn't use that word to refer to little people. Because I did once on a stream. I used what I didn't even know was a slur. I didn't even know using what is the M slur. I'm sure you all know what it is, but I didn't even know that was a slur. That was news to me at that moment when I said it. And then other content creators started DMing me, being like, "Hey, did you know there's a clip going around of you using this and blah blah blah? It's part of a long history of this." And I was like, I genuinely didn't. I sincerely apologize. I will not, and I will work very hard on not using that term in the future. I will use little people, and I deeply apologize to that community or anyone else I may have insulted. That kind of thing. something, that was different. In that case, that was like a good faith critique where someone and other content creators and community members and stuff like that were just like, hey, if you didn't know, here's the thing. They weren't trying to cancel me. They weren't trying to go after me. They weren't trying to do all that kind of stuff. It was very simple. When it comes to the R-SLUR and its history, it's obviously got deep roots in a whole bunch of very, very horrifying aspects, including eugenics, and including using it as a justification and classification for people who are considered lesser than and are not considered to be part of what is going to be the esteemed master race and things like that, and so they must be removed forcibly through from society. Like that's there is a lot of severity to that. The same thing with the history behind the F-SLUR, you know, being about a bundle of sticks used to burn homosexuals in the past. There is severity to those words, and then there is, of course, use and reclamation. No one is here to police the private behavior that every single person does in their own homes at all times, because that's impossible, right? Like there's no effective way of doing thought police. You can do advocacy, you can talk about advocacy, and you can go forward and talk about, hey, this is maybe a good idea, this is a bad idea, or what you can do. But ultimately, if people, and especially people in a community, want to start using different forms of reclamation, then it's on people on the outside of that community to listen to them. Just like how the use of the N-word has evolved within the Black community, it's now been used. It's used as a form of reclamation, and then there are very seldom examples. It's the majority of the time used as a term of endearment, and obviously it's an altered form of the original word. You often hear the difference between the soft A and the hard R. I don't know if anyone else knows the moment when most white people even recognize this if they weren't into hip hop, but it was on Oprah. It was on an Oprah episode where Ludacris actually had to explain to Oprah the difference between the two. It was because this movie about race relations came out called Crash that everyone bought into immediately as being the greatest film of all time, and then it turned out it was actual shit. It was weird. It was like a collective delusion that everyone just had. Maybe it was just well-to-do liberals. Everyone was just like, yes, that's the movie that ended racism. It's a good thing. It's a good thing the Crash happened. And then so the cast of Crash was on Oprah, and then Ludacris was explaining to Oprah, well, there's actually a difference between the use of the hard R and the softer A in order to show a sign of affection or endearment amongst members of the Black community and stuff like that. Either way, that's when white people recognized what was going on. My point being behind all this is that, broadly speaking, in terms of online, it seems overwhelmingly both the community with communities that experience disabilities or neurodivergent communities have both said and asked for people, especially people who are not within those communities, to stop using that word as a form of an insult, as a pejorative, to stop using that word in that way, and to stop reaffirming or normalizing the use of that word. I don't think that's a huge ask. To be completely frank. Prong999, thank you. I appreciate it. And I also, one other thing I've wanted to know for some time now. Let's go here and make this small. I'm super teeny on this screen. I've never understood this part. Valid criticism over here. Pure woke scoldery over here. I think some people, especially content creators, and this one isn't actually specific to anyone. Yeah, there's obviously a chart here, right? I don't know why there are some content creators who don't go through this process of being like, this one probably is maybe around here, this one's around here, because like I've certainly known the difference between, because I don't think woke scolding is a thing, but I've certainly known the difference between people going off about things that are not genuinely going to change or help people's material conditions and making them into causes. That part is, that's true. That, like I've experienced that online. I've experienced people, there's this phenomenon of people who get really, really mad sometimes when I don't talk about X. They'll come on the stream and be like, you didn't mention Lebanon today. Why? That is a disgrace. You call yourself a leftist and you haven't mentioned Lebanon today. And it's like, have you mentioned the thing I'm literally talking about right now today? And if not, are you less of a leftist for that? Or are you like that whole exercise and like why why aren't you talking about the thing that I care deeply about? Yeah, that's an absurd thing to try and levy on people, as if it's somehow a character flaw on them at the time, right? It's a really weird thing. People do it in all walks of life too. It's not just online world. It happens a lot. But there's some content creators who just always seem to think like this is the only potential thing that's happening to me. And that's not always true. Like, there are times when online criticism of me is directed at something that I am doing incorrectly in my field or my own take, and it's coming from my own community. You know, that does happen. There are valid criticisms. There are valid criticisms that come from different content creators, and sometimes they'll flood the replies of one of my posts, being like, normally, I'm a fan of you, Serfs, but like this is not the right take. This is not what this clip was saying. You are factually misinterpreting what I hate Ben Shapiro, but you're getting this one wrong. This is not what he's saying in this clip. And then you start to see the blah, 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 blah. And then eventually I'm like, oh, okay. And then I go back, find the context, look at it. Oh, okay, they were right. So I'm deleting that tweet. And yeah, I'm sorry. I too am very fallible, like every other person. And that happens, right? And there's a difference between doing that and straight up being like, well, then how can I attack you? Like, well, what have you done in the past? I'm now going to go after this person. So let's look it up. Oh, shit. They said this like 6 years ago. Hey, here's all your receipts, blah, blah, blah. Look at that. Like all the shitty things you do. So obviously there's bad faith, like unfair criticisms that are completely fair for people to ignore or mock because they're coming from a bad place. Like whenever I get a right winger online who'll be like, answer this question right now, Serfs. Will you kill a pedophile if given the opportunity? Answer now, right? Like, this is 100% harvesting. This is a bad faith question, not asked by someone who genuinely cares about what my own principles or beliefs are, but because they want me to type something out now that they can use. They can go out and use it to be able to do something incredibly fucked up, And so, again, my messaging is to try and normalize for not just big content creators, but everybody. Like there is no shame in taking fair, good faith criticism in, and then just taking a step to look at it, because the honest answer is all of us are trying to do better, and we're all going to fuck up. And I have fucked up in the past, and I'm sorry to tell you, I'm going to fuck up in the future, as will other people. This is a thing, and it's going to happen to each and every one of you at one point in your life. I know there's this weird fear amongst like the right and some liberals that like, because of the wokeness that's overtaken us all, you can't say anything anymore, or you'll get canceled. Yeah, it's like you can't even say the things you want to say. And it's like, well, you know, there's a huge difference between you coming out and being like, those N-words sure are lazy, and you coming out and being like, hey, could I touch your hair? It looks kind of fuzzy. Like there's a difference between those two, and there's a huge severity between the difference of those two, and you should be able to discuss both openly. But like, just because someone is suddenly criticizing you about these kind of things out loud, like you need to normalize, because it's really far right authoritarians and strongmen who have that facade of I'm never wrong, or I don't ever have bad takes, or I don't ever do anything like that. I've said before, there's times when I have, in the kindest of ways, done a good faith critique of someone. Like, shoe on head. People, especially in the LGBT community, like I think it was 2 years ago when she had the whole like pride thing where it's like, you can't ever convince me that like it's okay for kids to be around drag twerking or some shit like that. I made a whole video about that issue, about it was the Kinky Pride thing, about Kinky Pride and why there's a long history, and there's a history of people nowadays, because we're always going to talk about the term tender queers. There is a problem nowadays with people being too sensitive about certain things. So I want to just talk about how, Pride was not just a celebration and a parade. It was a goddamn protest, and it was a violent one, and there's a long history of violent protests for LGBTQ plus people fighting to get very basic human rights along that struggle. And amongst those people who were fighting for their rights and all that kind of stuff were, yes, leather-bound people, leather daddies, leather lesbians, all kinds of leather-clad individuals, and that is a long, proud tradition of them wanting to express themselves in such a way where they don't feel that the way they are dressed in public is something to be ashamed of. That's it. They want to feel normal for one day of the year. They want to be able to go outside and not only feel normal, but also be in the majority in that parade. See a lot more other leather daddies and leather mummies, dressed up in leather MBs in the pursuit of that. There's obviously rules and regulations. This is something that the LGBTQ plus community has been dealing with for a really long time, and so they do have dress codes, and there are people who will break those dress codes, especially when you have thousands and thousands of people who are partying or drinking. One or two is going to break that dress code. That isn't a condemnation of every single person who is obeying the dress code in that moment. But to say that we shouldn't allow to have leather strapped or leather bound or bears in leather or anything like that, when we have hypersexuality of hetero people everywhere all the time, 24/7. Like it's in all the ads, it's in all the consumer advertising. It's like every 2 seconds you're being exposed to giant boobies in a bikini and stuff like that. Then it's probably not that big of a deal to have a guy who is almost topless and wearing some leather and wearing like a leather hat, maybe some leather chaps, whatever the case may be. But anyways, I made a video about that, and I made it in incredibly good faith, and I was, at the time, Shu even DM'd me to talk about how, she actually hadn't thought of, some of those perspectives. It seemed, constructive, and then boom, it was Shu did the whole start the discourse again, and then 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 at that point, it was just well, no, these critiques aren't going to be good faith anymore. You're basically just now doing a lot of heavy fucking lifting for the far right, and it's having a demonstrably violent effect upon LGBTQ plus people. People are showing up to drag shows with guns. They're shooting down fucking power stations. They're calling in bomb threats to hospitals. This isn't as much it never was a game, but it's certainly the furthest thing from one now. There's legitimate danger that LGBTQ plus people and trans people especially, and black trans people especially, are facing a real world danger on a regular basis. So no, I'm no longer going to be all right, so I know all of you are ready to really go at Shu for this one, but I just want to say that I don't think she totally understands maybe the history of Stonewall or stuff. We're gonna go through that right now, and then talk about how both leather daddies have a place in Pride and all that kind of stuff, and that it's not actually protecting kids for us to do these fake outrage cycles and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there is a difference between getting valid criticism and then trying to grow or whatever it is based on a valid criticism, and what people are always calling woke scoldery or just performative wokeness. I'll be honest with you, in terms of because I've been obviously called a woke scold all the time by other content creators. I leave so much alone. There is so many times when online there's a whole bunch of just mini political battles going on, even going on in the left spaces alone, where I'm it's more important for me right now to tweet about Palestine, so I'm going to tweet about Palestine. I'm not going to join the 20-person thread that's going on here. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes I can't help myself and I do one post. The next thing I know, I'm 42 posts later in the middle of the discourse or something like that. But for the most part, when I see all those things going, I'll follow them, I'll pay attention. But I'm, again, not trying to woke scold anybody, or I'm not trying to participate, because my position is most likely not going to be in agreement with that this is okay, that it's okay to do those kind of things. But it's probably a picking your battles thing for me, where it's much more serious things are going on in other corners of the internet at this moment, so I'm not going to talk about that one. But every day, of course, there's inter battles between content creators, battles, and sometimes content creators of the same political persuasion. How many people who used to be friends and allies are now angry at each other? There are times too when there's criticism of people, say Little Joel criticizing me on his Little Joel channel. I in no way, shape, or form dislike Joel anymore now. I have the same love for Big Joel as I do for Little Joel, and all the Joels really. Yeah, I think it's totally fair for him. He was like in good faith to be like, so I happen to love Mr. Beast, and Serfs did this, and because I love Mr. Beast and I think he does good things, I'm going to talk about this. But also, even though I love Mr. Beast, it is kind of weird that in this moment in time, he's saying that like 1.5 million is how much he lost on a video. That's a really weird thing to say, because you run a business and you're super rich and famous, and there's just no way you can genuinely think that that's not a business expense, or you can try to pass off a business expense as charity. That's kind of weird, you know? Very fair critique. I disagree with his Mr. Beast takes, fundamentally. I'm probably going to make a video on it when the discourse moves on from that, so that it won't take away from the whole healthcare discourse. But yeah, I don't think Little Joel was woke scolding me. I don't think he was purity testing. I don't think he was like, so now Serfs is no longer allowed to be known as a part of leftist media creators, or now Serfs is no longer allowed to be part of any of this, you know? And it's like the discourse that can never stop, the Mr. Beast discourse.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demo, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tal, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojack, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.